Now we're going to take a look at how to use the camera tool to either change your framing or to create a camera movement like a pan or a truck or a zoom. The first thing we'll take a look at is what's called the static camera, which means using the camera tool to change the framing without showing a big camera move like a pan. So for example, I have this scene here, a pretty wide shot of a house and a meadow and a tree in the foreground. And after I've drawn it, let's say I decide that I want to change the framing of this scene, and I can do that with the static camera tool. So to use the camera tool, I will go over to the toolbar, the tools toolbar, and then I will find this, which is the camera tool. So I'll click on that. And as I do, notice that this outline of the frame has changed. It's gotten a little bit darker, and there's a dot in the upper left-hand corner and a dot in the center. This center dot is the pivot point or the center point of the frame. And up in the corner, we have little icons that appear that let us either rotate this camera frame or to resize it. And so let me first show you how you can move the actual camera frame. If you go over this center dot, you'll see that this icon appears, which is the drag icon. And if we click and drag on that center pivot point, then we can move the camera around. Let me drag it back into place. Anytime you move the camera, you could put it back into its original place by going up to the menu where it says Camera, click on that and press Reset Camera, and it pops back into the original place that it was. Now, if we're using the static camera for basically just changing the framing of an entire scene, it's going to be helpful to take a look at the drawing workspace. It's a little bit easier to see the effect that this has. So I'm going to click over to the drawing workspace. In the drawing workspace, there's a row of thumbnails underneath the stage view. And this is a good place to get a sort of a preview to see what your framing looks like. I'm also going to zoom out a little bit on my workspace so that we can see what we're doing. I'm going to press the 1 key to zoom out. And again, this is a zoom out that I'm just doing on my workspace. It has nothing to do with what the camera is doing. So now, if I want to change the framing, once again, I can click and drag on that center point. And as I let go, you can see underneath in the preview that it shows that the framing has changed. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to take my cursor and put it over that center pivot point until I get the drag tool. I'm going to click and move. I'm going to put it over the tree right now. And as I look down here in the preview panel, I can see that it has moved the frame. This is what I'm going to be seeing now when I render the animation. If I want to change the size of the frame, basically to zoom in or zoom out on the actual camera, I put my cursor in the upper left-hand corner and I can see that a new icon has appeared, and this icon lets me change the size of the field. I can click and drag toward the center to zoom in, and I could click and drag outward from the center to zoom out. And take a look down at the preview down here and you can see how it's affecting. So now I'm going to zoom in by click and drag toward the center, and as I let go you can see that it re-renders the preview. And then I can also move the camera, and you can again see how the preview is affected. And there is another thing that you can do with this camera frame, which is to rotate it. When you hover your cursor outside of any of those 4 corners, you get a rotation tool. You just click and drag either clockwise or counterclockwise to rotate the tool. In the case of a rotated camera frame, when you look down at the thumbnail image, you're going to see the artwork that you've drawn and the tilted frame on top of it. So this doesn't show right now the way that the artwork is going to look like when it's finally rendered, because when it is rendered, that green triangle is going to represent the camera frame and all the artwork is actually going to be tilted. So to get an idea of what that's going to look like when it's rendered, I will just show you that I can output this particular panel to a bitmap image, and when I do, we'll be able to see what it looks like when I open it. So I have just exported this particular image into a JPEG form. It's one of the forms that you can export out to. You can export to PDF, you can export to movie files, but I really wanted to show you that when you rotate the camera counterclockwise in your storyboard, when it does get rendered, the camera basically stays in place because the camera is the viewer's eye and that never changes. So instead of the camera being tilted counterclockwise, the way it appears is that the image has rotated clockwise. So even though you see a tilted camera frame in your project, when it's rendered, the camera is going to be straight and the artwork is going to be tilted. You may have noticed that the camera rectangle in the thumbnail is green, and the green rectangle is there just to let us know that the camera has been modified. So let me go up here to reset the camera so that you can see when I reset it, then the camera in the preview is going to turn back to black to indicate that it is once again the standard camera. So I will just go up to the camera menu, hit reset camera. As I do, the camera gets reset to normal, and the camera that we see in the preview thumbnail is also back to normal. So once again, a quick refresher: to change the camera, to zoom in, I can click and drag inward or outward, and as I do, you can see it update. I can drag it by that center pivot point, and you can see it update. And I also want to point out that you can also drag that camera from the outside of the boundary box too. But just watch out for the corners, because when you get into the corners, either the rotation tool appears or the resize tool appears. And again, you can see that now I have a green border on that because it has been changed. Another way you can change the framing of your static camera is to come over to the Tool Properties panel for your camera, and in there you'll see many of the options, including keyframes, which we'll be dealing with later. But if you simply want to change the zoom level of your static camera, you can go over to this field here, which represents the field of view, and you could just type in a different number. By default, it's set to 41 degrees, but if I wanted to change it, for example, to 55, I would just type in 55. I will press enter, and as I do, you'll be able to see the zoom change here on the framing and the result in the preview thumbnail. So I'm going to press enter, and the camera field has changed and it got updated here as well.